I thought the silence in Grandma Marjorie's house would be the heaviest thing I had to carry. I was wrong. The real weight came when my own mother dragged me into court, demanding $6.8 million and accusing me of manipulating a dying woman. She thought she was fighting for an inheritance. She didn't know Grandma had left me a secret video that would expose exactly why my mother was so terrified of the truth. The fog rolled off the Atlantic and settled over Havenport like a heavy, wet wool blanket. It was the kind of gray afternoon that made the Victorian houses along the cliff walk look less like grand estates and more like fortresses bracing for a siege. I stood by the window of the parlor in my grandmother's house, watching the condensation bead on the glass. The air inside smelled of lilies and old paper, that specific, suffocating perfume of mourning that seems to cling to your clothes long after the service ends. I was 33 years old, and I felt hollowed out. The memorial had been intimate, just as Grandma Marjorie had requested. No fanfare, no speeches by people who hadn't visited in a decade, just the people who actually knew the woman, not the reputation or the bank account. I felt a raw, scraping grief in my chest, but beneath it, there was a quiet, steady current of relief. Not that she was gone, never that, but that we had made it to the finish line intact. Her long illness, a slow erosion of her physical strength, had never touched her mind. She had never looked at me with vacancy. She had never forgotten my name. Up until her final breath, she was Marjorie Patterson, sharp as a tack and twice as piercing. I turned away from the window. The house was filling up with the murmur of low voices. My cousins were clustered near the buffet, balancing plates of finger sandwiches. My aunts were inspecting the upholstery, their eyes darting around the room, appraising the furniture with a hunger they tried to disguise as nostalgia. And then there was my mother, Elaine. She sat on the velvet settee in the center of the room, holding court. She was wearing a black dress that was tasteful, yet incredibly expensive. The kind of garment that whispers money rather than shouting it. She accepted condolences with a practiced grace, dabbing at dry eyes with a lace handkerchief. To anyone else, she looked like the grieving daughter, but I knew the tension in her jaw. I knew the way her eyes kept flicking toward the hallway, as if she were waiting for something, or someone, to validate her performance. We had not spoken more than 10 words to each other in 6 months. I made my way to the kitchen to escape the performance. I needed water. I needed silence. But the silence was short-lived. The next morning, the silence was shattered completely. The reading of the will took place at the offices of Briar Hollow Trust and Estates, a firm that occupied a brick building downtown that smelled of lemon polish and billable hours. The conference room was large, dominated by a mahogany table that could have seated 20. There were only 8 of us. Mr. Henderson, the probate attorney, sat at the head of the table. He was a man of few words and even fewer expressions, which I appreciated. He adjusted his spectacles and opened the heavy folder in front of him. I sat at the far end, away from my mother. Elaine sat near the front, her posture rigid. Next to her sat my Aunt Linda and Uncle Robert. My cousins, the ones who had leaked stories about me later, sat against the wall, looking bored and entitled. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. I am here to read the last will and testament of Marjorie Alice Patterson, dated 8 months ago, he said. His voice was dry, devoid of theater. The room seemed to suck in its breath. 8 months ago. That was right around the time I had moved into the Havenport house to help care for Grandma full-time. Mr. Henderson began with the smaller bequests. A collection of jewelry to Aunt Linda, a vintage car to Uncle Robert, $10,000 to each grandchild, a generous donation of $50,000 to the Havenport Arts Fund. Elaine nodded along, impatient. She was waiting for the main event. She was waiting for the house, the portfolio, the legacy, and then Mr. Henderson turned the page. To my daughter, Elaine Patterson, I leave the sum of $100,000 to be distributed in quarterly installments over the course of 2 years. He read. The silence in the room changed. It went from attentive to electric. $100,000. In a vacuum, it was a lot of money. In the context of the Patterson estate, It was a slap in the face. It was an allowance. Elaine did not move. She did not breathe. To my granddaughter, Sarah Patterson, whom I trust implicitly with my legacy and my memory, I leave the remainder of my estate, including the property at 42 Ocean View Drive, all contents therein, and the entirety of my investment portfolio held at Sovereign Wealth, currently valued at approximately $6,800,000. The number hung in the air. $6,800,000. I felt the blood drain from my face. I gripped the armrests of my chair. I had known Grandma was comfortable. I had known the house was paid off. I had not known there was nearly $7 million in liquid assets. I looked up. Every pair of eyes in the room was fixed on me. My cousins looked furious. Aunt Linda looked like she had swallowed a lemon. But it was my mother's face that chilled me. She wasn't looking at me with anger. She was looking at me with a cold, terrifying calculation. It was the look of a predator realizing it had underestimated its prey. Mr. Henderson continued, unaware or uncaring of the grenade he had just tossed. I also appoint 2 co-executors to administer this estate. He said, myself, representing the legal interests, and Mr. Gavin Rourke, Mrs. Patterson's financial advisor of 20 years. The door opened, and a man stepped in. I recognized him vaguely. Gavin Rourke. He was in his late 50s, handsome in a silver fox sort of way, with a tan that spoke of winters spent in Florida and a suit that cost more than my first car. He nodded to the room, his expression somber. Elaine stood up. Her chair scraped violently against the floorboards. "This is a mistake," she said. Her voice was low, trembling not with sorrow, but with rage. "Sit down, Elaine." "Mr. Henderson said calmly. "No," she snapped. She turned to look at me. Her eyes were hard, glossy marbles. You know this is not what she wanted. I stayed seated. I did not trust my voice. She was confused. Elaine said, her voice rising. She was isolated. She did not know what she was signing. She was perfectly lucid. "Mom," I said quietly. It was the first time I had called her mom in a year. Elaine laughed. A harsh, brittle sound. "Lucid? You were the only one there. Sarah, you were the gatekeeper. You worked her. You worked her for months while she was dying." The accusation hit me like a physical blow. I had washed my grandmother's hair when she was too weak to lift her arms. I had read to her until my voice was hoarse. I had held her hand through the night terrors. I had done it because I loved her, and because no one else was there. Mr. Henderson stood up. "Mrs. Patterson, if you wish to contest the will, there are legal avenues for that. This is not the place." Elaine stared at him. Then she looked back at me. She didn't scream. She didn't throw anything. She just smoothed the front of her dress, picked up her purse, and walked over to where I was sitting. She leaned down, her perfume overpowering the scent of old paper. "You think you have won," she whispered. "You have no idea what you have just started." Then she turned and walked out. The heavy door clicked shut behind her. But the threat remained in the room, vibrating in the air. I looked at Gavin Rourke. He was watching the door where Elaine had exited, a strange, unreadable expression on his face. Then he looked at me and smiled. It was a practiced smile, meant to be reassuring, but it didn't reach his eyes. "We have a lot of work to do." "Sarah," he said. I realized then that I wasn't just an heir, I was a target. The lawsuit arrived exactly 1 week later. I was at my apartment in Boston, trying to reintegrate into my real life. I had a job as a project manager at a healthcare tech company, a job I had neglected for months while caring for Grandma. My inbox was a disaster zone, and my plants were dead. I was trying to focus on a spreadsheet when the buzzer rang. A man in a windbreaker handed me a thick envelope. He didn't say, "You have been served." He just asked for my name, handed it over, and walked away. I opened it in my kitchen, my hands shaking. Elaine Patterson versus the estate of Marjorie Alice Patterson. The legal language was dense, but the meaning was clear. My mother was suing to invalidate the will. The allegations were laid out in bullet points that made my stomach churn. Undue influence, lack of testamentary capacity, elder abuse. She was claiming that I had manipulated an isolated, confused old woman into cutting her own daughter out of her legacy. She was demanding that the will be thrown out and the estate be redistributed according to the laws of intestacy, which would give the bulk of the money to her. I sat on my kitchen floor and cried. Not because of the money. I didn't care about the money. I cried because she was rewriting history. She was taking the most painful, tender months of my life, the months I spent saying goodbye to the woman who had raised me more than she ever had, and turning them into a crime scene. But the tears didn't last long. They were replaced by a cold knot of anxiety when my phone rang the next morning. It was Human Resources. "Sarah, could you come down to the office?" Beatrice from HR asked. Her voice was tight. When I walked into the small, glass-walled office, Beatrice wouldn't meet my eyes. She had her laptop open. "We have had a bit of a situation," she said. She turned the laptop around. It was a legal news aggregator, a website that scraped court filings and posted them online. There, under the heading Local Litigation, was my name, Tech Manager. Accused of elder manipulation in multi-million-dollar estate battle. It wasn't a major news story. It was barely a blip. But in my industry, healthcare technology, where trust and ethics were paramount, it was a nuclear bomb. "We serve vulnerable populations." "Sarah," Beatrice said, finally looking at me, "we handle data for elderly patients. Perception is reality in this business." I stared at the screen. I felt like the room was tilting. "Beatrice, this is a family dispute. It is not true. It is a frivolous lawsuit. I am sure it is," she said, her voice devoid of sympathy. "But until this is resolved, we think it is best if you take a leave of absence. Paid, of course, but we need to distance the company from this kind of language." They were sidelining me. My mother's lawsuit hadn't just attacked my character, it had reached into my career and strangled it. I walked out of the building carrying a box of my personal effects, standing on the sidewalk in the middle of a Tuesday, realizing that my life as I knew it was over. The steady, private professional Sarah Patterson was gone. In her place was a defendant. I needed help. I found Mina Calder through a friend of a friend. Her office was nothing like Briar Hollow. It was in a converted warehouse in the Seaport District, modern and stark. Mina herself was sharp angles and intense focus. She didn't offer me tea. She offered me a strategy. She read the filing in silence, her eyes scanning the pages with laser speed. When she finished, she tossed the papers onto her desk. "It is a classic shakedown," she said. She leaned back in her chair, studying me. "Your mother knows she probably cannot win on the facts. Proving undue influence is incredibly hard, especially if the medical records show your grandmother was lucid." "Then why is she doing it?" I asked. "Because probate fights are not about facts, Sarah. They are about narratives. And right now, she is writing the story. She is painting you as the greedy granddaughter who swooped in at the last minute and brainwashed the dying matriarch. She is banking on the fact that you will be too ashamed or too scared to fight back. She wants a settlement. She wants you to pay her to go away. I don't want to settle." I said, "It is not about the money. It is about what is true." Mina nodded. "Good. Then we fight. But you need to understand something. This is going to get ugly. She is going to drag your name through the mud. She is going to weaponize everything you ever said or did." I thought about the HR meeting. She already has. Mina's advice was strict. Say nothing. Do not post on social media. Do not talk to family members. Do not defend yourself publicly. Silence is your shield, she said. Let her scream. We will speak in court. I tried to follow her advice. I really did. I stayed off Instagram. I didn't answer the texts from my aunts asking for the real story. I holed up in my apartment, feeling like a fugitive, but silence leaves a vacuum, and my family was more than happy to fill it. 3 days later, my cousin, let us call her Jenna, because she always hated that name, posted a long, emotional thread on Facebook. Jenna had visited Grandma exactly twice in the last year, both times to ask for money for a startup that never started. It breaks my heart to see how families can be torn apart by greed. She wrote, "My grandmother was isolated in her final months. Visitors were turned away. She was controlled. It is devastating to know she died wondering where we all were. When the truth is, we were being kept out." She didn't tag me. She didn't have to. The comments section was a cesspool of sympathy and outrage. Who would do that? People asked. That granddaughter should be in jail. Someone else wrote, I read the comments until my eyes blurred. They were talking about me. They were talking about the nights I slept on the floor by Grandma's bed because she was scared of the dark. They were talking about the times I canceled my own dates, my own trips, my own life, to make sure she wasn't alone. They were twisting my sacrifice into a cage. I threw my phone across the room. It hit the wall with a satisfying crack, but the screen didn't break. It just glowed up at me from the carpet, a portal to a world that hated me. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on the floor. Surrounded by boxes of paperwork I had brought back from Havenport, I felt completely, utterly alone. The grief I had felt at the funeral was gone, replaced by a hot, bitter anger. I reached for a stack of mail I had ignored for days. Bills, sympathy cards, a flyer for a pizza place. At the bottom of the stack was a heavy cream envelope. The handwriting on the front was shaky, the ink slightly smeared. Sarah. I froze. I knew that handwriting. I had seen it on birthday cards and grocery lists for 30 years. It was from Grandma. I tore the envelope open. Inside was a standard condolence card, the kind you buy in a drugstore pack. The front had a picture of a lighthouse. I opened it. There was no date. Just a single line of text, written in her familiar looping script, which had grown jagged toward the end. If she comes for this, trust what I left you, when the time is right. That was it. No explanation, no I love you, no goodbye. Just an instruction. I turned the card over, shaking it. Something small and metallic clattered onto the floor. I picked it up. It was a key. It was tiny, silver, and looked like it belonged to a diary or a small cabinet. It had a piece of masking tape wrapped around the head, but nothing was written on it. I held the key up to the light. If she comes for this, Grandma had known. She had sat in that house, looking out at the gray ocean, and she had known exactly what her daughter would do. She hadn't just left me a fortune, she had left me a defense. I looked at the key, and for the first time in a week, the crushing weight on my chest lightened just a fraction. I wasn't alone in this fight. Marjorie Patterson was still calling the shots. I put the key in my pocket and closed my fist around it. The metal was cold, hard, and real. Elaine wanted a war. She was writing a narrative about a confused old woman and a manipulative granddaughter. But she had forgotten one thing. Marjorie Patterson never did anything without a plan. I stood up. I picked up my phone. I didn't open social media. I opened my contacts and found Mina Calder's number. I didn't call her. It was late. But I stared at the name. Tomorrow, I would go back to Havenport. I would find what this key opened, and I would finish what Grandma had started. The drive back to Havenport felt less like a commute and more like a tactical deployment. I had the tiny silver key in the zippered pocket of my purse, and every time I hit a pothole on the interstate, I patted the leather just to make sure it was still there. The house at 42 Ocean View Drive was waiting for me, not as a sanctuary this time, but as a vault. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked different. The creeping ivy that Grandma had loved so much now looked like it was trying to strangle the brick. A no trespassing sign, which Mina had advised me to put up, stood stark and unfriendly near the mailbox. I unlocked the front door and stepped into the silence. It was cold inside. I had turned the thermostat down to save money, a habit that felt ridiculous now that I knew how much money was actually in the estate. But old habits died hard. I went straight to the study. It was a room that smelled of lemon oil and old books. Grandma's desk was a massive, roll-top oak beast that had belonged to her father. It was where she paid bills, wrote letters, and apparently plotted her endgame. I sat in her leather chair. It squeaked, a sound so familiar it made my chest ache. I pulled the key from my purse. It was small, simple, the kind of key you might find for a diary or a jewelry box. I tried the center drawer, locked. I slid the key into the mechanism. It met resistance, then turned with a satisfying, heavy click. I pulled the drawer open. It was not full of random clutter. There were no loose paper clips or dried-out pens. There was only one thing in the drawer: a thick, navy blue binder, and taped to the top of it, a white envelope. I reached for the binder first. The label on the spine was typed in Grandma's distinct, uncompromising style. Legacy packet. Private. I opened it. The first page was a table of contents, dated and initialed. My breath caught in my throat. I turned the page. It was a log, a meticulous daily log of her life for the past 2 years. October 14th, doctor, Evans visit, reviewed medication list, blood pressure 120/80, discussed politics and the new rose bushes, cognition normal. October 16th, Elaine visited, asked for $12,000 for a bridge loan. I refused. She became agitated, accused me of hoarding resources. I asked her to leave. I flipped through the pages, my hands trembling. She had written it all down, every doctor's visit, every conversation, every time someone came to the house. She had noted the time, the topic, and her own mental state. It wasn't just a diary, it was an affidavit. She had known. She had known Elaine would challenge her mind, so she had built a paper trail of her sanity. I picked up the white envelope. It was sealed with red wax. Grandma had a flair for the dramatic, and marked or counsel only. I held it up to the light. It felt like there was a thumb drive inside. I did not open it. The instruction was clear. Counsel. That meant Mina. I packed the binder and the envelope into my tote bag, locked the house, and drove straight back to Boston. Mina Calder's office was bright with the hard, white light of a cloudy afternoon. She cleared a space on her desk and opened the binder. I watched her face as she read. Mina was not a woman who gave much away, but I saw her eyebrows lift. "Sarah," she said, looking up at me. "This is incredible. Is it enough?" I asked. "Is it enough to stop the lawsuit?" Mina tapped a manicured fingernail on the page. "It is strong evidence of capacity. It shows she was tracking her own health and interactions. It directly contradicts the narrative that she was confused or easily manipulated. Look at this entry here." She pointed to a date from 3 months ago. Met with Gavin Rourke, reviewed portfolio performance, instructed him to move 10% into bonds. He seemed hesitant but complied. "I am concerned about his focus lately. She was managing her own portfolio changes weeks before she died." Mina said, "That is not the behavior of a woman with dementia." Then she picked up the envelope. "And this?" I shook my head. "I haven't opened it. It says for counsel." Mina took a letter opener and slit the top of the envelope. She tipped it upside down. A sleek silver flash drive slid out onto the glass desktop. "I will need to have this imaged and reviewed," she said, if she labeled it for counsel. She likely intended it to be privileged communication, which keeps it out of Elaine's hands for now, but we need to know what is on it. She set the drive aside and leaned forward, her expression hardening. "However, we have a problem, or rather, a new front in the war." She slid a letter across the desk toward me. It was on heavy, cream-colored bond paper with the letterhead Klein Associates. "Wesley Klein, Elaine's attorney." Mina said, "He sent this over this morning." Read the second paragraph. I picked up the letter. The language was aggressive, sharp, and dripping with condescension. "We demand the immediate production of all text messages, emails, voicemails, and written correspondence between Sarah Patterson and the decedent, Marjorie Patterson, for the period of the last 5 years. Furthermore, we demand a forensic accounting of all gifts, transfers, and asset movements involving Ms. Patterson during this period. Failure to comply will be viewed as spoliation of evidence." "He wants 5 years of my texts?" I asked, my voice rising. "That is insane. I talk to Grandma every day. That is thousands of messages. It is intimidation dressed up as legal procedure," Mina said calmly. "He is trying to bury us in paperwork. He wants to make this so expensive and so invasive that you give up. He wants you to panic. I felt a flash of heat in my chest. I am not panicking. Good, Mina said. Because we are going to push back. We will argue that the scope is overly broad and harassing, but, Sarah, you need to prepare yourself. They are going to look for anything. A joke about money, a complaint about Elaine, a moment of frustration, and they are going to twist it. Let them look. I said, I have nothing to hide. Mina looked at me with a mixture of pity and respect. Everyone has something to hide. Sarah, even if it is just a bad mood. But while they are digging into you, we are going to do some digging of our own. What do you mean? I ran a preliminary asset check on your mother. Mina said, standard procedure in a case where money is the primary motivator. And it turns out, Elaine is not just disappointed about the will. She is underwater. I stared at her. What? Mina opened a file on her laptop and turned the screen toward me. It was a credit report, a mess of red ink and warning flags. She has a lien on a property in mesmerizing debt. Mina said, a boutique she tried to open 3 years ago that shuttered within 6 months. There are outstanding business loans totaling nearly $200,000, and her personal credit cards are maxed out. I felt a wave of dizziness. Elaine lived in a beautiful condo. She drove a leased Lexus. She went on vacations to Napa. She has been living on credit. I whispered. She is desperate, Mina corrected. This lawsuit is not about principle. It is about survival. If she does not get this money, she is looking at bankruptcy. Maybe worse. I sat back in my chair, the reality sinking in. My mother wasn't just grieving and angry. She was cornered, and a cornered animal bites. The discovery of Elaine's debt changed the texture of the grief. It made it sharper, grittier. I wasn't just fighting a misunderstanding. I was standing between my mother and her financial ruin. But instead of sympathy, I felt a cold resolve. She could have asked. She could have told Grandma the truth. Instead, she had lied, postured, and now she was suing. I needed to know more. The next day, I went back to Havenport. I had arranged to meet Gavin Rourke at the house. As co-executor, he had access, and he claimed he needed to inventory some of the physical assets for the probate filing. He arrived in a black sedan that looked like it had just been washed. He stepped out, wearing a navy blazer and loafers, looking every inch the trustworthy financial advisor. Sarah, he said, extending a hand. How are you holding up? I am fine, Gavin, I said, shaking his hand. It was cool and dry. He followed me into the house. He walked with a proprietary air, his eyes scanning the rooms as if he were appraising the furniture for an auction. I have started the valuation process on the portfolio, he said, opening his briefcase on the dining room table. The markets are a bit volatile right now, but Marjorie was well diversified. I watched him. There was something slick about him, something that didn't sit right. Mina found some interesting notes in Grandma's papers. I said, testing him. He didn't flinch, but his hands paused on the latch of his briefcase. Oh? What kind of notes? Just general things. Notes about meetings. She mentioned she was concerned about some transactions. Gavin laughed. A short, dismissive sound. Marjorie worried about everything toward the end. She would call me at 3 a.m. asking if the bond market had crashed. It was just the anxiety speaking. She wrote that she instructed you to move 10% into bonds, and you were hesitant. I said, he looked up at me then, his blue eyes flat. I advised against it because the yield was low. It was my job to give her the best advice, Sarah, but I always followed her instructions. I remembered the entry in the binder. I am concerned about his focus. There were some transfers. I said, cash transfers, large ones. Do we have records of where those went? Gavin closed his briefcase. A sharp snap. Marjorie was a very private woman. Sarah. She insisted on privacy regarding her discretionary spending. I respected that. But you are the executor. I said, you have to know where the money went. I know what she told me, he said smoothly. And I know that digging too deep into a dead woman's private habits usually brings up things people prefer not to know. He smiled, but it was a warning. I wouldn't worry about the small details. Sarah, You are inheriting a fortune. Let us focus on protecting that from your mother. Shall we? He stayed for another hour, moving through the house, making notes on a clipboard. I stayed close to him, watching. When he finally left, I locked the door behind him and felt a distinct urge to wash my hands. He was hiding something. I didn't know what. But the privacy excuse was a shield, and I intended to break it. I spent the afternoon in the attic. It was hot, dusty, and filled with the debris of 3 generations. I was looking for financial records, old bank statements, canceled checks, anything that predated the digital records Gavin controlled. I found a box marked 2015 to 2018 banking. I sat on the floor, surrounded by fiberglass insulation and dust motes, and started sorting. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. Elaine had claimed in her lawsuit that Grandma had cut her off and punished her for years. Creating a dynamic of financial abuse, I held a canceled check in my hand, dated 4 years ago, paid to the order of Elaine Patterson, $10,000. The memo line said, "For the shop, I found another one, $5,000. Rent assistance, another, $15,000. Taxes, I laid them out on the floorboards. There were dozens of them. Over the last 5 years, Grandma had given Elaine nearly $100,000. She hadn't cut her off. She had been propping her up. I took photos of every check. This was proof. Elaine was lying about the estrangement, and she was lying about the financial cruelty. Grandma had been generous until the very end, or until she realized the money was going into a black hole. I packed the checks into a plastic bag to bring to Mina. As I was leaving the house, I saw my neighbor, Tess Aldridge, checking her mail at the end of the driveway. Tess had lived next door for 30 years. She was a retired schoolteacher with sharp eyes and a gossip network that rivaled the NSA. "Tess!" I called out, walking down the driveway. She looked up, startled. "Sarah? Oh, honey, I didn't know you were here." She hurried over, her face softening into sympathy. "I am so sorry about Marjorie. I still look at the porch expecting to see her there." "Thank you." "Tess," I said. She hesitated, looking toward the house, then back at me. Her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "I heard about the trouble. With your mother. News traveled fast in Havenport. It is complicated." I said. Tess shook her head. "It is not right. Marjorie loved that woman, even if she drove her crazy." She paused, biting her lip. "Sarah, I wasn't going to say anything. I don't want to get involved. But what?" I asked gently. "I saw them," Tess said. "About 2 months before Marjorie died, I was out pruning the hydrangeas. Elaine was here, on the porch." I stiffened. "What happened?" "They were shouting." Tess said, "Well, Elaine was shouting. Marjorie was just sitting there, looking so small. Elaine was screaming about money," she said. Tess looked around to make sure no one was listening. She said, "You owe me this. You can't take it with you." It was awful. Sarah. I almost called the police. My stomach twisted. "Did you hear anything else?" I heard Marjorie say, "I am done paying for your mistakes." And then Elaine stormed off. She slammed her car door so hard I thought the window would shatter. I looked at Tess. This woman was a witness. She had seen the aggression. She had heard the motive. "Tess, would you be willing to tell a lawyer that?" I asked. Tess recoiled, her eyes widening. "Oh, no, Sarah. I can't go to court. I can't be in the middle of this. I have to live here. Elaine has friends in town. I don't want the drama." "Please," I said. "It could help prove Grandma wasn't the one being abusive." I can't," Tess said. Stepping back, "I just wanted you to know. But don't ask me to testify. Please." She turned and walked quickly back to her house, her head down. I watched her go. I had the truth. But truth without testimony was just a story. I called Mina from the car. Tess Aldridge saw them fighting. I said, "She heard Elaine demand money, but she won't testify." Mina sighed on the other end of the line. "That is common. Sarah, neighbors don't want to be involved. And honestly, even if she did testify, Eyewitness testimony is slippery. How? It is a direct observation. It is subjective, Mina said, Elaine's lawyer. This Wesley Klein, he would tear her apart. He would ask how far away she was. He would ask if she wears hearing aids. He would ask if she liked Elaine. He would paint it as a stressful family argument that a nosy neighbor misinterpreted. The court wants proof. Sarah, hard proof. Not vibes from the flower bed. I looked at the plastic bag of checks on the passenger seat. I have the checks. I have the binder. Good, Mina said. That is hard proof. Bring them to me tomorrow. And Sarah? Yes? Get some sleep. You sound like you are running on fumes. I didn't sleep. I went back to the Havenport house. I couldn't stand the thought of being in my apartment, waiting for the next legal threat. I felt closer to the answer here. I sat in the study, the only room that felt secure. It was midnight. The house settled around me with creaks and groans that sounded like footsteps. I took the flash drive out of my bag. Mina had said she would image it, but I couldn't wait. I needed to know. I had brought a laptop specifically for this, a burner air-gapped from the internet, just in case. I plugged the silver drive into the USB port. The computer chimed. A window popped up. Drive locked. Enter password. I stared at the prompt. Of course. Grandma wouldn't just leave it open. I tried the usuals. Her birthday. My birthday. The address? Marjorie? Incorrect password. Incorrect password. Incorrect password. I sat back, rubbing my eyes. Think. Sarah. Think like her. There was a password hint button. I clicked it. A small text box appeared. Your first lullaby. I froze. My first lullaby. The memory washed over me, sudden and visceral. I was 4 years old. I was staying with Grandma because my parents were fighting. A common occurrence. I was crying in the guest room, terrified of the shadows. Grandma had come in. She hadn't turned on the light. She had just sat on the edge of the bed and stroked my hair, and she had started to sing. It wasn't a normal lullaby. It wasn't Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. It was an old folk song she loved. A song about a boat and a storm and a baby being safe. The Skyboat song. I remembered Elaine making fun of it years later. Mother, why did you sing her that depressing Scottish dirge? No wonder she is so serious. It is about safety. Elaine, Grandma had said, it is about carrying the future over the sea. It is sentimental nonsense, Elaine had scoffed. Your first lullaby. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. It was a test. Only someone who really knew her, who really knew us, would know this. Elaine would never guess it. She had dismissed it as nonsense. I typed it in. Speed Bonnie boat. I hit enter. The screen blinked. The red padlock icon turned green and unlocked. A file directory opened. My heart hammered against my ribs. The folder was organized with terrifying precision. Scans_financial, audio_logs, medical_records, and at the bottom, a single video file, e-truth_final, MP4. I moved the cursor to the video file. My hand was shaking so badly the mouse cursor jittered across the screen. I double-clicked. The media player opened, a black screen. The loading circle spun. Then, a jagged line of static tore across the screen. A high-pitched digital screech filled the room. I jammed the volume down. The video stuttered. I saw a frame, just a single frame, of Grandma sitting in her armchair, looking directly at the camera. She looked pale, serious. Then the image fractured into green and purple pixels. The audio was a garbled mess of robotic noise. File corrupted. The error message popped up in the center of the screen. I stared at it. File corrupted. I tried to play it again. Same result. Static, noise, failure. I opened the properties of the file. It was huge. The data was there, but something was wrong with the playback. I sat in the dark, the blue light of the error message illuminating my face. E-truth_final. Grandma had recorded a video. She had named it The Truth, and now it wouldn't play. I felt a cold prickle on the back of my neck. Mina had said the drive was for counsel only. Had I broken it? Or had someone else tried to get into it before me? I pulled the drive out of the computer. I had the key. I had the binder. I had the checks. And now, I had a broken video that might be the smoking gun. I needed an expert. And I needed to know why Grandma had hidden this specific file behind a lullaby my mother hated. The war wasn't just about money anymore. It was about a secret so heavy it had corrupted the file that held it. I put the drive back in the envelope and shoved it deep into my bag. I needed to get to Mina, fast, before Elaine, or whoever she was working with, realized what I had found. The morning after I unlocked the drive, the sky over Boston was the color of a bruised plum. I sat in the passenger seat of Mina Calder's car, the envelope containing the flash drive resting on my lap like a live grenade. We were driving to Cambridge, to a nondescript office park that housed a digital forensics firm Mina trusted. I had barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the jagged static that had torn across Grandma's face on the screen. E-truth_final. The file name was a promise, but the corruption felt like a threat. We parked in front of a building with no signage. Just a number, 240. Inside, the air was cool and hummed with the sound of high-powered servers. We were met by a man named Kenji, who looked more like an exhausted graduate student than a forensic wizard. He wore a hoodie and rubbed his eyes as Mina introduced us. "This is the drive," Mina said, nodding to the envelope in my hands. I handed it over. Kenji took it with a pair of gloved hands, treating it with more reverence than I had. "What is the issue?" he asked. "It opens with a password." I explained. I guessed the password. It unlocked a directory. All the files work. PDFs, audio clips, except the video. It is a large file, but it plays static and then crashes. Kenji nodded, his face impassive. He led us into a small, glass-walled room full of monitors. He plugged the drive into a standalone unit, completely isolated from the network. I watched the screen as lines of code cascaded down like green rain. It was a language I didn't speak, but I could feel the tension in the room. Mina stood with her arms crossed, her eyes sharp. Kenji typed a series of commands. He frowned. "This is interesting," he said. "What?" I asked. Stepping closer, "The file is not corrupted in the traditional sense," Kenji said. "Usually, corruption means data loss. Bits have rotted away. But the file size here is perfect. The data is all there." "Then why won't it play?" Mina asked. "Because it is double encrypted," Kenji said. He spun his chair around to face us. "The first password, the one you guessed, the lullaby, that unlocked the drive's partition. It gave you access to the folder. But the video file itself? It is wrapped in a secondary layer of encryption, a shell. Can you crack it?" I asked. Kenji looked at the screen again. "It is sophisticated. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. It is not off-the-shelf software. But here's the part you should worry about." He pointed to a string of text on the monitor. "See this timestamp?" I squinted. It was a date and time. "That is a modification log," Kenji said. "Someone tried to access this file. They tried to brute force the encryption." I looked at the date. My blood ran cold. The date was 3 weeks ago. Grandma died 5 weeks ago. Someone tried to open this after she died? I whispered. "Yes," Kenji said. "And they failed. The system locked down. That is why you are seeing static. It is a failsafe. If I try to force it open now, the file might self-destruct. It is designed to be opened only with a specific key." I looked at Mina. She was staring at the date, her jaw tight. "Who had access to the drive?" Mina asked. "It was in her desk." I said, "Locked in a drawer. I had the key." "Who else had access to the house?" Mina asked. I thought about the empty rooms, the silence, and then I remembered the co-executor. "Gavin Rourke," I said. "He has keys. He has been in the house to do inventory." Mina's eyes met mine. "And he is the one who told you not to dig too deep." She said. Kenji pulled the drive out and handed it back to me. "Do not try to play it again," he warned. "If you trigger the failsafe one more time, the data will be scrubbed. You need the key. And I don't mean a password you type in." "What do you mean?" I asked. The encryption protocol looks for a hardware handshake. Kenji said, it is looking for a physical digital token, a smart card, a dongle, maybe a QR code with embedded binary, until you find that. This video is just a ghost. We drove back to the city in silence, the weight of the new reality settling in. Someone had been in the house. Someone had found the drive. Someone had tried to destroy or steal the truth, but Grandma's paranoia had outsmarted them. And that meant I wasn't just fighting a lawsuit. I was in a race. When I got back to my apartment, I felt a strange vibration in my pocket. It was my phone, a notification from my email. Urgent. Emergency motion for temporary restraining order and asset freeze. I froze on the sidewalk. I opened the attachment. It was from the court. Elaine had filed an emergency petition. Plaintiff alleges that the defendant, Sarah Patterson, is actively dissipating estate assets and destroying evidence located at the primary residence. Plaintiff requests an immediate order barring the defendant from entering the property at 42 Ocean View Drive and freezing all accounts associated with the estate. She is kicking me out, I said out loud. I called Mina immediately. She had already seen it. I am looking at it. Sarah, she said. Her voice clipped. This is an ambush. Can she do this? I asked. That is my house. The will says it is mine. The will is under contest. Mina said, until probate is settled, the house is technically in limbo. And by claiming you are destroying evidence, she is giving the judge a reason to lock it down to preserve the status quo. But I am not destroying evidence. I am finding it. We know that. Mina said, but the judge doesn't. Not yet. I have to go back. I said, I have to get my things. The checks. The binder. You have 2 hours. Mina said, the order goes into effect at 5 o'clock. Get what you need and get out. Do not take anything that looks like furniture or valuables. Just your personal effects and the papers. If you take a silver spoon, she will use it to paint you as a looter. I drove to Havenport at 80 miles per hour. When I arrived, a sheriff's deputy was already parked at the curb. He wasn't aggressive, but he was there. A visual reminder of the line I was about to cross. I kept my head down and walked past him. I have an hour. Officer, I said, just keep it brief. Ma'am, he said, touching the brim of his hat. I ran into the house. It felt different now. It didn't feel like Grandma's home. It felt like a crime scene. I grabbed my clothes. I grabbed the box of checks I had found in the attic. I grabbed the binder. I went to the study. I checked the drawer where I had found the drive. Empty. I checked the false bottom of the jewelry box where I had found the tiny key. Empty. I stood in the center of the living room, looking at the dust dancing in the late afternoon light. I was being evicted. My mother was evicting me from the home where she had grown up, the home where I had held my grandmother's hand as she took her last breath. It wasn't just a legal maneuver, it was an exorcism. She was trying to scrub me from the narrative. I walked out the front door with 2 suitcases and a box of papers. I locked the door and handed the key to the deputy. You give this to the court administrator, I said, my voice shaking with a rage I could barely suppress. Do not give it to Elaine Patterson. The deputy nodded. I will log it, ma'am. I drove away without looking back. I couldn't go home to Boston. The commute for the upcoming hearings would be too long, and I needed to be close to the investigation. I checked into a short-term rental 3 towns over, a beige, sterile condo with generic art on the walls and a smell of industrial cleaner. I sat on the unfamiliar sofa, feeling completely dislodged. My grief, which had been a heavy but private coat I wore, had been stripped away. I wasn't allowed to mourn in her chair. I wasn't allowed to smell her books. Even my sadness had to happen on Elaine's terms. 2 days later, I was sitting in Mina's office, staring at a wall of law books. Mina came in with a folder, looking more energized than I had seen her in weeks. Sarah, I found something. She said, about the video? No. About the lawyers. She sat down and opened the file. I was curious why Elaine switched legal teams. She said, her previous attorney was a family friend. Old school, very gentle. Wesley Klein is a shark. He is expensive, aggressive, and usually handles corporate litigation, not probate. So she wanted a killer. I said, maybe, but look at this. Mina slid a paper across the desk. It was a printout of a legal proceeding from 4 years ago. State Regulatory Commission versus Apex Financial Partners. Apex Financial is Gavin Rourke's firm. Mina said, they were investigated for some gray area compliance issues regarding offshore accounts. They were cleared. Eventually. I looked at the document. Who represented them? Mina pointed to a name halfway down the page. Lead counsel. Wesley Klein. I stared at the name. So Elaine's lawyer used to represent the neutral co-executor? I asked. Exactly. Mina said, in a town this size. Legal circles overlap. It happens. It is not illegal, but it is. Convenient. It is a conflict of interest. I said. Technically. No. Mina said, Klein represents Elaine, not Gavin, but it suggests a relationship. It suggests that maybe Elaine didn't find Klein in the phone book. Maybe Gavin recommended him. Why would Gavin help Elaine sue the estate he's supposed to protect? Mina leaned back. That is the $6.8 million question. Unless he is not protecting the estate. Unless he is protecting himself. I thought about the corrupted video, the timestamp, the failed access attempt. Gavin had keys. Gavin was in the house. Gavin had a history with Klein. I need to talk to him. I said, Sarah, Mina warned. He is slippery. Do not show him your cards. I won't. I said, I just want to see if he sweats. I met Gavin at a coffee shop near the harbor. It was neutral ground. Public. Safe. He was drinking an espresso, looking relaxed and tanned, as if he weren't in the middle of a legal hurricane. Sarah, he said, standing up to greet me. I heard about the house. I'm so sorry. I tried to talk some sense into Klein, but he is a bulldog. I sat down. He is very aggressive. I said, keeping my voice even, he is doing his job. I suppose, Gavin said, but it is tragic. Families shouldn't fight like this. I stirred my black coffee. It is funny you mention Klein. I was looking him up. Did you know he represented your firm a few years back? During that regulatory audit? Gavin didn't freeze. He didn't spill his coffee, but there was a microsecond pause, a tiny stillness before he smiled. Ah, you have been doing your homework, he said. Yes, Wesley is a brilliant attorney. He got us through a very sticky misunderstanding with the state. It is a small world. Sarah, lawyers, bankers, we all swim in the same pond. So you recommended him to Elaine? I asked. Gavin shrugged. Elaine asked for a recommendation for a litigator. I gave her 3 names. She chose Wesley. I am impartial in this. Sarah, my duty is to the estate. Is it? I asked. He leaned forward, his elbows on the table. The friendly uncle mask slipped just a fraction. Sarah, you sound paranoid. This process is stressful. I understand that. But you need to trust that we are all trying to reach a resolution. He took a sip of his espresso, then looked at me over the rim of the cup. Speaking of resolution, have you found anything unusual in your grandmother's papers? The question landed softly, but it felt like a hand closing around my throat. Unusual? I asked. You know, Gavin said, waving a hand vaguely. Old letters, distinct instructions. Marjorie got very creative toward the end. I just want to make sure we have accounted for everything. If there are any other documents, it is best if I catalog them. He was fishing. He was terrified. I looked him in the eye. No, Gavin, I said, just bills and birthday cards. Nothing that would interest a lawyer. He held my gaze for a second too long, searching for the lie. Then he smiled again. Good. That simplifies things. He checked his watch. A Rolex that probably cost more than my car. I have to run. But Sarah? Be careful. This lawsuit is going to get harder before it gets easier. He stood up and walked away. I watched him go. He was right about one thing. It was going to get harder. But he was wrong about the other. I wasn't paranoid. I was right. The mediation was scheduled for a Tuesday. Mina explained that it was a mandatory step. The court wanted us to try to settle before dragging a jury into a family feud. We met in a conference room at a neutral law office in Boston. The room was beige, air-conditioned to the point of discomfort, and smelled of stale coffee. Elaine was already there. She sat at the far end of the table, flanked by Wesley Klein. She looked thinner. Her cheekbones were sharp, her makeup impeccable, but unable to hide the shadows under her eyes. She wore a simple gray suit, projecting an image of aggrieved dignity. I sat next to Mina. I refused to look at my mother. I looked at the legal pad in front of me. Mr. Klein began. He spoke for 20 minutes about the tragedy of the situation, about the need for healing, and about the fairness of redistributing the assets. He used words like equitable and familial duty. Then he slid a paper across the table. Our proposal, he said. Mina picked it up. She read it, her face impassive, then passed it to me. Settlement offer. 1. Sarah Patterson retains ownership of the property at 42 Ocean View Drive. 2. The entirety of the liquid investment portfolio, $6.8 million, is transferred to Elaine Patterson. 3. Sarah Patterson agrees to a non-disparagement clause. 4. All claims of undue influence are dropped with prejudice. I stared at the paper. They wanted the money, all of it. They were leaving me the house I couldn't afford to maintain without the endowment, and taking the cash. It is a generous offer, Klein said smoothly. Sarah keeps the home she loves. Elaine gets the financial stability she needs. It restores the natural order. Mina leaned forward. The natural order? Marjorie's will is the natural order. She left the money to Sarah. This offer strips 90% of the estate's value from the primary beneficiary. Elaine spoke for the first time. It is not about the value. Mina, she said. Her voice was soft, trembling. It is about peace. She looked at me. Finally, I looked back. Sarah, she said, look at us. We are in a room with lawyers. Mom would hate this. She wouldn't have sued me. I said. Elaine flinched. I am not suing you. I am correcting a mistake. You are young. You have a career. You have time to build wealth. I am alone. She reached across the table, her hand hovering near mine, but not touching it. Just give me the security. Sarah, keep the house. Let me have the stability. We can end this today, right now. No more court. No more reporters. We can be a family again. For a second, just a second, I wavered. I was so tired. I was tired of the rental condo. I was tired of the fear. I was tired of the static in my head. If I signed this, it would be over. I could go back to the house. I could sleep in my own bed. I could pretend none of this happened. $6.8 million. It was just money. I didn't need it. I just wanted my mother back. I looked at her pleading eyes. They were wet with tears. Okay, I started to say. Elaine's shoulders sagged in relief. Thank God. But then she added, in a whisper that was meant to be comforting but came out sharp with panic, you have no idea what happens if I lose. I stopped. The words hung in the cold air of the conference room. You have no idea what happens if I lose. It wasn't, I will be sad. It wasn't. It is not fair. It was a statement of consequence. I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the tremor in her hands. I saw the terror behind the tears. This wasn't about retirement money. This was about a debt collector at the door. This was about the North Pine Outreach Fund and the checks to the private obligation if she lost. Something bad was going to happen to her. And if I gave her the money, I wasn't saving her. I was feeding the beast that had her trapped. I pulled my hand back. No, I said. The room went deadly silent. Elaine's face hardened. What? I said no, I repeated, my voice gaining strength. Grandma knew about your debts. Mom, she knew you were in trouble. That is why she didn't leave you the money. She knew it wouldn't last. She knew it would go to whoever you are afraid of. Elaine stood up. Her chair crashed backward. You selfish little... Sit down. Elaine, Klein barked. She didn't sit. She glared at me. The mask completely gone. The grief was replaced by a pure, white-hot desperation. You are going to ruin everything, she hissed. Then she grabbed her purse and stormed out of the room. Klein gathered his papers, looking annoyed but not surprised. "We will see you in court," he said, and followed her. I sat there, my heart pounding in my ears. I had just turned down peace. I had just declared total war. Mina put a hand on my arm. "You did the right thing. Sarah, she is terrified, and terrified people make mistakes." That evening, I was back in the beige rental, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I had just made the biggest mistake of my life. My phone rang. It was Kenji, the forensic expert. "Sarah, are you sitting down?" he asked. "I am." I said, "Did you crack the video?" "Not exactly," he said, "but I found the keyhole." "Explain." "I spent the last 48 hours analyzing the encryption shell." Kenji said, "It is not looking for a digital file. It is looking for a complex visual pattern." "A visual pattern?" "A QR code," Kenji said, "but not a standard one. It is a high-density matrix code. The camera on your computer. When the software boots up, it activates the webcam. It is waiting for you to hold something up to the lens." "Hold what up?" I asked. "That is the question." Kenji said, "The code is embedded in the software, but I can't reverse engineer the image. I just know that the key is a physical object, a card, a photo, a document, something Marjorie owned." I closed my eyes. A physical object, a scavenger hunt. And then I remembered the tiny key, the one I had found in the condolence card, the one that opened the drawer. But the drawer had been empty except for the binder. "Wait," I said, "the key I found." It opened the drawer. But maybe that wasn't the point. Maybe the key was just to get me to the binder. I thought about the house. I thought about the objects Grandma loved. "Kenji," I said, "does the software give any prompt? Any text?" "Yes." Kenji said, "I dug into the hex code. There is a text string hidden in the error log. It says, 'If I am gone, play this only with counsel present.'" That was the label on the envelope. "Is there anything else?" I asked. "One more line," Kenji said. "Beneath the false bottom." I sat up straight. "The jewelry box." When I had searched the house during my eviction hour, I had checked the jewelry box where I found the first key. It was empty. But Grandma had a dozen jewelry boxes, and she had one specific box, an old, ugly wooden thing with a velvet lining, that she kept on her vanity. I hadn't checked that one because it only ever held costume jewelry. Beneath the false bottom, I didn't have the box. It was in the house I was legally barred from entering, the house that was currently locked down by a court order, but I knew where it was. I have to get back into the house. I told Kenji. "You can't." Kenji said, "You will get arrested." I didn't answer. I hung up the phone. I walked to the window of the rental condo. Outside, the rain was starting to fall, blurring the streetlights. Elaine was desperate. She had told me I didn't know what would happen if she lost. She was right. I didn't know. But I knew that whatever was hunting her was also the reason Grandma had locked the truth away. I had to get that box. I had to get the QR code. If I couldn't walk through the front door, I would have to find another way in. Grandma had raised me to be a steady, private professional, but she had also raised me to be a Patterson. And Pattersons didn't let a little thing like a court order stand in the way of the truth. I grabbed my coat. I wasn't going to the house tonight. I was going to plan, because if I was going to break into my own inheritance, I had to be perfect. The tiny key was just the beginning. The real game had just started. The rain in Havenport was not a cleansing shower. It was a curtain, thick and impenetrable, turning the world into a smear of charcoal and gray. I parked my rental car 3 streets away from 42 Ocean View Drive. I was wearing dark clothes, a hood pulled low, and gloves. I felt ridiculous, like a character in a bad spy novel. Until I remembered the stakes. This wasn't fiction. This was my inheritance, my reputation, and my grandmother's final wish being held hostage by a court order. I knew the house better than the sheriff's deputy who was supposedly patrolling the neighborhood. I knew that the motion sensor on the back patio light had been broken since the blizzard of '98. I knew that the cellar bulkhead had a latch that didn't quite catch if you jiggled it from the outside. I moved through the neighbor's hedge. the wet leaves slapping against my face. The house loomed above me, dark and silent. It looked abandoned, a shell of the warmth it had once held. I reached the bulkhead. I knelt in the mud, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I worked the handle, praying the rusty metal wouldn't screech. It gave a dull groan and lifted. I slipped inside, descending into the smell of damp earth and old coal. I came up through the kitchen. The house was cold. The silence was absolute. I didn't turn on a light. I used the flashlight on my phone, keeping the beam aimed at the floor. I moved quickly to the master bedroom. The vanity stood in the corner, a relic of the 1940s. The mirror caught the reflection of my flashlight beam, throwing wild shadows against the floral wallpaper. I scanned the surface, perfume bottles, a silver hairbrush, and there it was, the jewelry box. It was an ugly thing, a heavy wooden chest with brass fittings that had tarnished to black. Grandma had kept it for 40 years, calling it her junk box. It was where she threw mismatched earrings and broken chains. I opened it. A tangle of costume jewelry glittered in the dim light. I dumped the contents onto the vanity top. The clatter sounded like a gunshot in the quiet house. I froze, listening. Nothing. Just the rain drumming on the roof. I felt the bottom of the box. It was velvet-lined. I pressed on the corners. Nothing happened. I pressed harder on the center. I felt a slight give. Beneath the false bottom, I used a nail file from the vanity drawer to pry up the edge of the velvet insert. It popped up with a soft puff of dust. Lying in the shallow compartment underneath was a single, laminated card. It was the size of a playing card. On one side, printed in sharp black ink, was a QR code. On the other side, in Grandma's handwriting, were the words, "If I am gone, play this only with counsel present." I grabbed the card. I checked the box again. Empty. I shoved the card into my pocket and put the velvet bottom back in place. I swept the jewelry back into the box and closed the lid. I was halfway to the door when I saw the headlights sweep across the front window. A car was pulling into the driveway. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in my chest. Was it the deputy? Was it Gavin? I ducked into the hallway closet, pulling the door shut until it was just a crack open. I held my breath. The front door opened. Heavy footsteps on the hardwood. A flashlight beam cut through the darkness. "I don't see anything," a male voice said. It was Gavin Rourke. "I got an alert on the security system." Another voice said, a woman's voice, "Elaine, my mother was here. It is probably the wind." Gavin said, "Or a raccoon? The sensors are old." "Elaine, I want you to check the study," Elaine said. Her voice was brittle, tight with stress. "If she came back, if she took anything, she can't get in," Gavin said soothingly. "We changed the locks, remember? Just check." She snapped. They walked past the closet. I could smell Gavin's expensive cologne and the sharp, metallic scent of rain on their coats. They went into the study. I didn't wait. As soon as they were out of the foyer, I slipped out of the closet, moved silently to the kitchen, and bolted down the cellar stairs. I didn't stop until I was back in the rain, sprinting through the mud toward the safety of the street. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, shaking, the laminated card burning a hole in my pocket. They were scared. They were so scared that a sensor glitch brought them running in the middle of the night. I started the engine. I had the key. Now I needed the counsel. Mina Calder's office was the only place I felt safe. I arrived at 9 in the morning, placing the laminated card on her desk like a winning poker hand. "This is it," I said. Mina picked up the card, examining the QR code. "You broke into the house?" I exercised my right to retrieve personal property that was inadvertently left behind. I said, quoting the loophole she had mentioned days ago. Mina smiled, a rare, genuine expression. "You are learning." She called Kenji. He walked us through the process over speakerphone. We didn't need the forensic lab this time. We just needed a webcam and the encryption software on the flash drive. Mina plugged the drive into her laptop. The familiar static filled the screen. The prompt appeared. Authenticate. I held the laminated card up to the laptop's camera. The screen flickered. The static cleared instantly, replaced by a sharp, high-definition image. Marjorie Patterson sat in her favorite wingback chair. She was wearing her blue silk blouse, her hair perfectly coiffed. She held a newspaper in her lap, the Boston Globe, dated 4 months prior to her death. I felt a lump form in my throat. She looked so alive. "State your name and the date," a voice behind the camera said. It was a professional videographer's voice. "My name is Marjorie Alice Patterson," Grandma said. Her voice was clear, strong, lacking the tremolo of age that Elaine loved to imitate. "Today is November 12th. I am of sound mind and body. I am recording this statement to provide context for my estate planning and to protect my granddaughter, Sarah." Mina paused the video. "That is the date stamp," she said, pointing to the corner of the screen. "November. That is 3 months before she passed. And look at her. She is reading a newspaper. She is lucid. This kills the lack of capacity argument dead." "Play it," I whispered. Mina hit spacebar. "I know my daughter, Elaine, will challenge my will." Grandma continued. "She will say I was confused. She will say Sarah manipulated me. I want to be very clear. Sarah Patterson asked for nothing. She gave me her time, her care, and her love when I had very little of it from anyone else." Grandma looked directly into the lens. Her eyes were steely. "Elaine's anger is not about affection. It is about arithmetic. She believes she is owed this money. But I have supported Elaine for 40 years. I have paid her debts. I have covered her losses. And I have kept a record." Grandma reached down beside the chair and picked up a black, leather-bound notebook. "I call this the Harbor Ledger," she said. "It details every check, every transfer, and every request I regret honoring. It details the loans Elaine swore she would pay back and never did. If you are watching this, Sarah, it means you need proof. You will find the ledger hidden behind the face of the one I protected." The video cut to black for a second. Then a menu appeared. Chapter 1. "Complete?" Mina stopped the playback. "The Harbor Ledger." Mina said, "Do you know where it is?" "Behind the face of the one I protected." I repeated, "It has to be a photograph. There are 100 photos in that house." Mina said, "Yes, but only one person she felt she needed to protect." "Me?" I asked. "Or herself?" Mina said, "Or maybe someone else entirely. But Sarah, this video, this is strategic." She split it into chapters. She knew we would need to reveal information in stages. This first part establishes her sanity and points to the financial motive. "It is not just a motive," I said. "It is a receipt." Mina nodded. "And we are going to use it. But first, we need that ledger. If we have a handwritten log of debts, we can dismantle Elaine's claim that she was cut off arbitrarily. We can prove she drained the well herself. The house was still under court order, but I was done playing by rules that my mother was rewriting to suit herself. I went back that afternoon, in broad daylight, with a plan. I called Gavin Rourke. "Gavin," I said, injecting a tremor into my voice, "I need to get a suit for the hearing. My only good suit is in the guest room closet. Can I come get it? I don't want to violate the order, but I can't afford a new one." Gavin sounded relieved that I was asking for permission. "Of course, Sarah, I will meet you there. 10 minutes. He let me in. He stood in the foyer, checking emails on his phone, acting the part of the benevolent chaperone. I went upstairs. I grabbed a suit from the closet. Then I went into Grandma's bedroom. The walls were covered in framed photos. My graduation, Elaine's wedding, to her second husband, a picture of Grandpa on his boat, behind the face of the one I protected. I looked at the photo of me at age 5, sitting on the porch swing. Grandma had her arm around me, looking at the camera with a fierce, protective glare. It was taken the summer my parents divorced, the summer I lived there because Elaine was finding herself in Santa Fe. I took the frame off the wall. It was heavy. I turned it over. The backing was secured with small metal tabs. I pried them open. I lifted the cardboard backing. There, sandwiched between the cardboard and the photo, was a thin, black notebook, moleskin. I slipped it under my shirt, tucking it into the waistband of my jeans. I put the backing back on the frame and hung the picture on the wall. I walked downstairs, the notebook burning against my skin. "Got it," I said, holding up the suit. "Good luck on Tuesday," Gavin said. I looked at him. He looked tired. The tan was fading. "You too, Gavin," I said. I didn't open the ledger until I was in Mina's office. We sat side by side, turning the pages. It was devastating. It wasn't just a list of loans. It was a chronicle of extortion. June 2018. Elaine demanded $15,000. Said she would lose the condo if I didn't pay. Paid. December 2019. Elaine asked for $25,000 for investment opportunity. Discovered later it was to pay off a credit line. Paid. August 2021. Elaine furious. Demanded I sign a temporary codicil giving her power of attorney over the investment account. I refused. She broke the vase in the hallway. I am afraid of her temper. Mina let out a low whistle. She tried to get power of attorney? That is huge. That goes to the heart of the coercion claim. I kept reading. Toward the end of the notebook, the entries changed. The amounts got larger, and the recipient wasn't always Elaine directly. January 2023. Elaine begging, crying on the phone, says she needs $50,000 immediately. Instructed me to write the check to North Pine Outreach Fund. She claims it is a charity she volunteers for, but she was too specific about the amount. I suspect it is not a charity. North Pine Outreach Fund. I said, I have never heard of it. Mina pulled her laptop over. Let us see who they are. She typed the name into the state's corporate registry. It popped up. North Pine Outreach Fund, 501C, 3, Registered Agent, Wallace P. Stern. The filings were sparse. They claimed to be a nonprofit dedicated to community wellness and financial literacy. Their annual revenue was erratic, zero for months, then a massive influx of cash, then zero again. Look at the board of directors. Mina said, it was a list of 3 names. I didn't recognize any of them. It looks like a shell. Mina said, a pass-through entity. If Elaine was funneling your grandmother's money into this, she wasn't donating it, she was hiding it, or paying someone. Mina picked up the phone. I am issuing a subpoena for North Pine's bank records, she said. If they are a legitimate charity, they will have nothing to hide. If they are a front, this is going to start a fire. The fire started 3 days later. Elaine's attorney, Wesley Klein, filed an emergency motion to quash the subpoena. He argued that North Pine was a third party irrelevant to the estate, and that investigating a charity was harassment intended to embarrass the plaintiff. Mina laughed when she read the motion. They are panicking, she said. You don't fight a subpoena this hard unless you are terrified of what the bank statements will show. But the panic wasn't just happening in the courtroom. I was driving back to my rental condo on a Thursday night. It was raining again. It seemed like it had been raining since the funeral. I was on a 2-lane road that wound through the marshlands outside of Havenport. I checked my rearview mirror. A pair of headlights was behind me. Bright, LED white. I slowed down to let them pass. They slowed down. I sped up. They sped up. My hands tightened on the wheel. I took a random right turn onto a dead-end street that led to a boat launch. The car followed. I pulled into the turnaround, my heart racing. The car pulled up perpendicular to me, blocking the exit for a split second. It was a black SUV, windows tinted so dark they looked like ink. I couldn't see the driver. I couldn't see a license plate. It was just a massive, dark shape in the rain. It sat there for 10 seconds, just long enough for me to feel the true, primal fear of being hunted. Then, the engine roared, and it peeled away, tires screeching on the wet asphalt. I sat there, breathing hard. Nothing had happened. No one had gotten out. No gun had been flashed, but the message was crystal clear. Stop digging. I drove home doing 10 miles under the speed limit, checking my mirrors every 4 seconds. When I got to the condo, I didn't go inside immediately. I sat in the car and called Elaine. She answered on the second ring. Hello? Her voice was guarded. Who is North Pine? Mom? I asked. I didn't say hello. I didn't ask how she was. There was a silence on the line. A silence so heavy it felt like static. I don't know what you're talking about. She said, Grandma left a ledger. I said, she wrote down every check. She wrote down the $50,000 you made her send to North Pine. I was followed tonight. Mom, a black SUV. Was that them? Or was that you? Sarah, you are being hysterical, she said, but her voice cracked. Tell me what you are paying for. I said, is it gambling? Is it a loan shark? Tell me, and maybe we can stop this before you end up in jail. You think this is about greed? Elaine whispered. The anger was gone, replaced by that same terrifying desperation I had seen at the mediation. You think I want a new car? You have no idea what I'm paying for. You have no idea what I have carried for this family. Then tell me, I screamed. I can't, she sobbed. I can't. Just drop it. Sarah, for your own sake, drop the subpoena. She hung up. I stared at the phone. You have no idea what I have carried for this family. She wasn't just paying a debt. She was paying hush money. The hearing was set for the following Monday. It wasn't the full trial, but it was an evidentiary hearing to determine if the will should be suspended pending a full competency review. If we lost this, the assets would be frozen for months, maybe years. Elaine would win by attrition. Mina and I met in her war room on Sunday night. The table was covered in blown-up exhibits, the checks, the pages from the harbor ledger, the medical records, and the drive. We have a choice. Mina said, we can play the video tomorrow. Is it admissible? I asked. I will argue it is a dying declaration of intent. Mina said, it is risky. Klein will object. He will say it is hearsay because he can't cross-examine a video, but if the judge sees it, if she sees Marjorie this lucid, this specific, it is game over for their capacity argument. But, I asked, I heard the hesitation in her voice, but once we play it, there is no going back. Mina said, this video accuses your mother of financial abuse. It accuses her of coercion. It exposes the North Pine payments. Once this is in the public record, the authorities might get involved. The DA could look at this as elder fraud. She looked at me, her eyes serious. If we do this, you are not just winning a lawsuit. You might be sending your mother to prison, or at the very least, destroying her life completely. Are you ready for that? I thought about the black SUV. I thought about the temporary codicil Elaine had tried to force Grandma to sign. I thought about the way Grandma had looked in the video, strong, but forced to hide her own truth in a jewelry box because she was afraid of her own daughter. And I thought about Elaine's voice on the phone. You have no idea what I have carried. She had a chance to tell me. She had a chance to stop. Instead, she sent someone to run me off the road. I looked at the drive. She sued me. Mina, I said quietly. She dragged Grandma's name through the mud to cover her own tracks. She made her choice. I pushed the drive across the table toward her. Play it. Mina nodded. She put the drive in her briefcase and snapped the lock shut. Get some sleep. Sarah, tomorrow is going to be a bloodbath. I went back to the condo, but I didn't sleep. I stood by the window, watching the rain, waiting for the black SUV to return. It didn't. But the silence was worse. It was the silence of a fuse burning down. Tomorrow, I would walk into a courtroom and detonate my family. And the scary part was, I wasn't doing it for the money. I was doing it because Grandma had asked me to. She had left me a key, a code, and a ledger. She had equipped me for this war. I just hoped I could survive the victory. The documents from North Pine Outreach Fund arrived on Mina's desk at 4 o'clock on a rainy Tuesday. They came in a standard banker's box, smelling of toner and dust, looking for all the world like the legitimate records of a boring, small-town charity. But nothing about this case was legitimate. Mina and I spent 3 hours dissecting them. Or rather, Mina dissected them while I watched the color drain from her face. This is wrong, Mina said, sliding a spreadsheet toward me. I looked at the rows of numbers. It looked like a standard ledger. Dates, amounts, donors. Look at the outflow, Mina said, tapping the paper with a pen. Money comes in. $50,000 from Marjorie Patterson, $20,000 from an anonymous donor, $10,000 from Elaine Patterson. She traced the line across the page, and then, within 48 hours, almost exactly 90% of that money goes out to 3 vendors: Apex Consulting, River Run Logistics, K Strategy Group. I looked at the names. They sounded like generic placeholders in a business textbook. I ran a search on these vendors. Mina said, "No websites, no LinkedIn profiles. Their registered addresses are mail drops in Delaware and Nevada." "What does that mean?" I asked, though I already felt the cold knot of realization in my stomach. "It means North Pine isn't a charity. Sarah, it is a washing machine. Money goes in clean, gets spun around, and comes out in the pockets of whoever owns these shell companies." I stared at the name Elaine Patterson on the donor list. My mother wasn't volunteering. She wasn't saving whales or feeding the hungry. She was feeding a machine. "She is laundering money," I whispered. "Or she is paying someone off," Mina said. "These payments to the vendors happen like clockwork. Every month, it looks less like charity and more like a subscription fee, or interest payments on a loan that never ends." I thought about Elaine's voice on the phone. "You have no idea what I'm paying for." She wasn't paying for a lifestyle. She was paying for silence, or safety. It was a horrifyingly mundane possibility. I had built up a narrative of grand villainy, of a daughter scorned by her mother. But the truth was likely grubbier. My mother was in trouble. She had gotten involved with something, or someone, that required a constant stream of cash. And when her own money ran out, she had turned to Grandma's accounts. And when Grandma cut her off, Elaine had sued to get the tap flowing again. I felt a wave of nausea. It wasn't just greed, it was survival. The next morning, the case shifted from paper trails to flesh and blood. I was at the rental condo, trying to force down a piece of toast, when my phone rang. The number was local. "Sarah?" a voice asked. It was hesitant, soft. "This is Sarah. It is Sonia Keats, your grandmother's aide." I sat up straighter. Sonia had been with Grandma for 2 years. She was a quiet, sturdy woman who made excellent tea and never gossiped. We had spent hours together at the house, changing sheets, managing meds. But we had never really talked about the family dynamics. "Sonia," I said, "it is so good to hear your voice. I heard about the court case." Sonia said, "I saw it in the paper. They are saying Marjorie was confused." She sounded angry, not loud angry, but that simmering, righteous indignation that honest people get when they hear a lie. "You know she wasn't." I said. "I know," Sonia said, "and I have proof." "Can you meet me?" I asked. I met her at a diner on the edge of town, a place with vinyl booths and coffee that tasted like battery acid. Sonia looked tired. She was wearing her scrubs, her hair pulled back in a practical bun. She had a notebook on the table in front of her. I kept a log. She said, tapping the book, "The agency requires it for billing, but I wrote down other things too, personal things, because I was worried." "Worried about what?" "About your mother," Sonia said bluntly. She opened the notebook. Her handwriting was small and cramped. "Marjorie was afraid of her." "Sarah. Not physically. I don't think Elaine would have hit her, but the shouting." Sonia shook her head. "There were days when Elaine would come over, and I would have to go sit in the kitchen because the yelling was so bad. Elaine would scream that she was going to lose everything. She would scream that Marjorie owed her." "Did Grandma ever say anything to you after?" I asked. Sonia nodded. She looked at me with sad, dark eyes. "One time, after a really bad fight, Marjorie was shaking. I was taking her blood pressure. It was through the roof. And she grabbed my wrist. She said, 'Sonia, if anything happens to me, you tell Sarah to check the blue binder. You tell her I didn't give in.'" I felt tears prick my eyes. Grandma had been fighting a war in her own living room. "Sonia," I said, "will you say this in court?" Sonia looked at her hands. I could lose my job. "Sarah, the agency hates when we get involved in client drama. It is a privacy violation." I reached across the table and took her hand. "If you don't speak, they are going to say she was senile. They are going to say she didn't know what she was doing. They're going to erase her. Sonia looked up at me. She took a deep breath. She was the sharpest woman I ever knew. She said fiercely, "I won't let them say she was crazy. I will testify. We had the documents. We had the witness. We had the video. But Elaine had fear, and fear makes people dangerous." That afternoon, an urgent notification popped up on my phone. Another motion filed by Wesley Klein. Motion to exclude evidence, inadmissible hearsay and digital manipulation. I called Mina. She is trying to kill the video, Mina said. Her voice was tight. Klein is arguing that since we can't cross-examine Marjorie, the video is hearsay, and he is claiming that because the file was corrupted initially, its integrity is compromised. He is suggesting it might be a deepfake. A deepfake? I laughed. But it was a hollow sound. That is desperate. It is effective. Mina countered. If he can plant enough doubt in the judge's mind about the technical validity of the file, the judge might exclude it to be safe. And without that video, we are back to a he said, she said about capacity. He is trying to block it without the judge even seeing it, isn't he? Exactly, Mina said. He knows if the judge sees Marjorie's face, hears her voice, his case evaporates. So he has to stop it at the door. We have to fight this. I said, we will. Mina said, I am bringing Kenji to court. He will testify to the encryption. He will testify that the video hasn't been altered, just protected. But Sarah, this signals something else. What? They know what is on it, Mina said. Or they suspect. Elaine is terrified of that video, which means she knows exactly what Grandma wanted to say. The blows kept coming. That evening, I was sitting on the floor of the rental condo, organizing exhibits, when my phone buzzed with a text. It was my cousin Jenna, the same cousin who had posted the Facebook diatribe about me isolating Grandma, the cousin who had started the public smear campaign. Sarah, can we talk? Please don't hate me. I stared at the screen. I wanted to block her. I wanted to scream, but curiosity and Grandma's voice in my head telling me to watch everything made me reply. I am listening. I am sorry. She wrote, I am so sorry about the post. I didn't know the whole story. You knew enough to lie. I typed back. I didn't want to. She replied. Aunt Elaine made me. I froze. Made you? How? A screenshot appeared. It was a text thread between Jenna and Elaine, dated 2 days after the funeral. Elaine. Jenna, I need you to post that statement today, the one we discussed. Jenna. It feels wrong. Aunt Elaine. Sarah was there every day. I don't want to start a fight. Elaine. This isn't a fight. It is survival. If Sarah keeps that money, the whole family loses. I can't help you with your startup if I don't get the estate. Do this for me, and I will make sure you are taken care of. Say what you need to say. It is for our future. It is for our future. I read the line 3 times. Elaine wasn't just fighting for herself. She was buying allies. She was promising cuts of the inheritance to turn the family against me. She had weaponized Jenna's financial struggles just like she had weaponized Grandma's love. She told me she would help me with my loans. Jenna texted, but now, with the lawsuit getting so scary, and seeing how she talks about you, I am scared. Sarah, I don't want to go to jail for perjury. Send me everything. I typed, every text, every email. Will you show them to the judge? I have to, I replied. There was a long pause. Then, a series of screenshots flooded my phone. It was a roadmap of manipulation. Elaine coaching the aunts. Elaine telling Uncle Robert to stay neutral if he wanted his share. Elaine orchestrating the isolation narrative like a conductor. I felt a profound sadness for Jenna. She was weak, yes, but she was also a victim of the same bulldozer that was trying to crush me. I forwarded the text to Mina. The cousin flipped. I wrote, We have proof of witness tampering. Mina replied instantly, This is the nail in the coffin, but be prepared. Tomorrow. You have to watch your mother destroyed. I didn't sleep that night. The hearing was at 9 the next morning. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling fan. I thought about the mother I had known as a child. The woman who taught me to tie my shoes. The woman who smelled of lavender and expensive wine. The woman who used to be fun, before the bitterness and the secrets took over. I didn't want to destroy her. I didn't want to see her in handcuffs. I didn't want to see her humiliated. I just wanted my life back. I wanted the truth to stand. But I realized, lying there, that I couldn't have both. To save the truth, I had to sacrifice the image of my mother. I had to accept that the woman I loved was gone, replaced by this desperate, clawing stranger. At 6 a.m, Mina called. I expected a pep talk. Instead, her voice was grim. I found something else. Sarah. What now? I asked, rubbing my eyes. I had my investigator look into Gavin Rourke's movements. She said, specifically, his interactions with the bank. And 2 days after Marjorie died, Gavin went to the First National Bank in Havenport. He tried to access her safe deposit box. 2 days? I said. But the will hadn't even been read yet. He wasn't officially executor. Exactly, Mina said. The bank manager denied him entry. He made a scene. He claimed he had urgent instructions from the deceased to retrieve a document, but because he didn't have the death certificate or the letters of administration yet, they turned him away. He was looking for the video. I said, the realization hit me like a slap. He knew about the box, or the ledger. Mina said, or both. Sarah, executors don't rush the bank 48 hours after a death unless they are panic-stricken. He wasn't doing his duty. He was doing a sweep. Why? I asked. Why does Gavin care so much? Mina paused. I have a theory, she said, and I don't like it. Tell me. I don't think Elaine is the mastermind. Mina said slowly. I think she is the designated driver of the getaway car. What do you mean? Elaine is in debt. She is desperate. That makes her easy to manipulate. But Gavin? Gavin manages the money. Gavin knows where the bodies are buried because he dug the graves. She took a breath. If Marjorie was funneling money to North Pine, and North Pine is a shell, who set up the shell? Elaine isn't sophisticated enough to create a network of LLCs in Delaware. She can barely manage a boutique, but a financial advisor? A man who specializes in wealth management and has a history of regulatory misunderstandings? My blood ran cold. You think Gavin set up North Pine? I asked. I think Gavin was helping Elaine drain the accounts for years. Mina said, maybe he was taking a cut. Maybe he was just charging her exorbitant fees. But when Marjorie started asking questions, when she started keeping a ledger, Gavin realized he was exposed. So he needs the will overturned. I said, connecting the dots. He needs the will overturned so that he remains in control. Mina said, if the will stands, you get everything. You get the audits. You get the scrutiny. If the will is thrown out and it goes to Elaine, well, Elaine is already in his pocket. He can control her. He can bury the North Pine records forever. He is using her, I whispered. He is using my mother's greed to cover his own crimes. And that, Mina said, is why he recommended Wesley Klein. He needed a lawyer who would fight dirty enough to win, but who wouldn't look too closely at the financial advisor. It was a house of cards, and Gavin Rourke was holding the glue. I hung up the phone and walked to the laptop on the dining table. I had the drive. I had the code. I needed to see the video one last time. I needed to hear it, not as evidence, but as a warning. I authenticated the file with the card. Marjorie's face appeared on the screen. I skipped past the part about the ledger. I skipped past the North Pine payments. I went to the end, the part I had been too afraid to watch closely before. Grandma looked into the camera. Her face was incredibly sad. Elaine came to me yesterday. She said, the date stamp was just 2 weeks before she died. She was crying. She said she was in trouble. She said if I didn't sign the power of attorney, if I didn't give her control. Grandma paused, her voice breaking. She said, you will never see Sarah again. My stomach dropped. The air left the room. She told me, I will tell Sarah you hate her. I will tell Sarah you are crazy. I will make sure she never walks through that door again unless you sign. Grandma wiped a tear from her cheek. Her hand was trembling. That was the moment. Sarah, that was the moment I knew I had to protect you. Not just your inheritance, but your memory of us. She tried to sell me your love for $50,000. Grandma leaned forward, her eyes fierce again. I didn't sign. I threw her out, and I called my lawyer. But I know she won't stop. So, if you are watching this, know that I love you. And know that the woman who raised you is not the woman who is suing you. That woman died a long time ago, killed by her own envy. Do not let her win. Do not let her take the last thing I have to give you. The video ended. I sat in the silence, the tears streaming down my face. It wasn't just about the money. It never was. Elaine had threatened to take me away. She had threatened to sever the only bond that mattered to Grandma, just to get access to a bank account. She had weaponized me. She had used my name as a bargaining chip in her extortion. A cold, hard fury settled in my chest. It replaced the grief. It replaced the hesitation. I wasn't struggling anymore. I wasn't worried about destroying my mother. My mother had tried to sell me. I closed the laptop. I put on my suit. I checked the mirror. My eyes were red, but they were dry. I picked up the phone and texted Mina. I am ready. Are you sure? She replied. She threatened to keep me away from Grandma. I typed. She used me as leverage. Burn it all down. Mina, burn it all down. I walked out of the condo and into the rain. The hearing was in 2 hours. Gavin Rourke thought he was smart. Elaine Patterson thought she was desperate. They were about to find out that Sarah Patterson was neither. She was just her grandmother's granddaughter, and she had the receipts. The courthouse in Havenport was a red brick building that had stood since the Civil War. It smelled of floor wax and old judgments. I saw them as soon as I walked into the lobby. Elaine stood by the metal detectors, looking small and fragile in a black dress. Wesley Klein was whispering in her ear, looking confident. And there was Gavin. He was standing a few feet away, checking his watch, looking like a man who had somewhere better to be. Elaine looked up. Our eyes met. She didn't look angry. She looked tired. She looked like a woman who was holding up a heavy ceiling with her bare hands. For a second, I felt a flicker of pity. Then I remembered the video. You will never see Sarah again. The pity vanished. I walked past her. I didn't nod. I didn't speak. Sarah, she said. Her voice was a plea. I kept walking. I met Mina outside the courtroom doors. She looked like a warrior. Her suit was sharp, her hair pulled back, her briefcase heavy with the truth. We have the motion to dismiss the video first, Mina said. Klein is going to argue hard, but I have Kenji prepped, and I have the cousins' texts ready for rebuttal if they claim family harmony. Let us go, I said. We walked into the courtroom. The judge was already on the bench. Judge Holloway. She was a stern woman with glasses on a chain and a reputation for hating wasted time. Case number 492. Estate of Marjorie Patterson. The bailiff called out. Mina and I sat at the plaintiff's table. No, the defendant's table. Elaine was the plaintiff. She was the one attacking. Mr. Klein stood up. Your Honor, before we proceed with the evidentiary hearing, we have a motion to exclude a piece of digital evidence that the defense intends to introduce. We believe this video file is inadmissible hearsay, lacks proper chain of custody, and shows signs of digital manipulation. Judge Holloway looked over her glasses. Digital manipulation. Mr. Klein? That is a serious charge. We have an expert affidavit stating the file was corrupted, Klein said smoothly. We believe it may be a deepfake generated to confuse the court. Given the age of the decedent and the technology available, Mina stood up. Your Honor, the file was not corrupted. It was encrypted, and we have the forensic specialist who unlocked it here to testify. Furthermore, this is not hearsay. It is a dying declaration regarding the disposition of assets and the threat of coercion. It goes to the very heart of the undue influence claim. The judge looked between them. I will hear the testimony regarding the video's authenticity, she said. If it is fake, Mr. Klein, I will throw it out and sanction the defense. If it is real, well, then we will watch it. Elaine shifted in her seat. I saw her hand grip the table. She knew what was coming. Gavin, sitting in the gallery behind her, looked perfectly calm. He didn't know yet. He didn't know that we had the bank logs. He didn't know we had the North Pine connection. He thought this was just a family squabble he could manage. He was wrong. Kenji took the stand. He was brilliant. He explained the hash sums, the modification logs, the physical key. He destroyed the deepfake theory in 10 minutes. The file is authentic. Your Honor, Kenji said. It was sealed by the user and opened only with the physical token. Judge Holloway nodded. The objection is overruled. The video will be admitted. Elaine made a small, choked sound. Klein put a hand on her shoulder, whispering urgently. Mina turned to me. This is it, she whispered. She plugged the laptop into the court's AV system. A large screen descended from the ceiling. Elaine's face was pale as a sheet. She wasn't looking at the screen. She was looking at Gavin. And for the first time, Gavin Rourke looked nervous. He stopped checking his watch. He stared at the screen, his eyes narrowing. Mina hit play. The courtroom filled with the sound of static, then cleared. Marjorie Patterson appeared, 10 feet tall, looking down on us all. My name is Marjorie Alice Patterson. The silence in the room was absolute. I watched my mother, as Grandma spoke, as she detailed the sanity, the love, the care. Elaine started to shake, and then the video reached the chapter about the ledger. I call this the Harbor Ledger. Gavin Rourke stiffened. He sat up straight, his face losing its color. Elaine demanded I write the check to North Pine Outreach Fund. Gavin closed his eyes. It was out. The name was out. Elaine let out a sob, a loud, ragged sound that echoed in the quiet room. Judge Holloway looked at her, then back at the screen. The video continued. It reached the climax, the coercion. She said, "You will never see Sarah again." A gasp went through the gallery. Even the bailiff looked shocked. Elaine put her head in her hands. The video ended. The screen went black. Judge Holloway slowly took off her glasses. She looked at Elaine Patterson. She looked at Wesley Klein. Then she looked at Gavin Rourke in the back row. "Mr. Klein," the judge said. Her voice was ice cold. "Do you have any cross-examination that can possibly address what we just saw?" Klein stood up. He opened his mouth. He closed it. He looked at his client, who was sobbing into her hands. He looked at the screen. "Your Honor," he stammered. We request a recess." "No," Elaine said. She stood up. She was shaking so hard she had to lean on the table. "No recess," she said. Her voice was wrecked, wet with tears. She turned around. She didn't look at me. She looked at Gavin. "It is over," she said. "Elaine, sit down," Klein hissed. "I can't do it anymore," she screamed. The sound tore through the courtroom. "I can't do it." She looked at the judge. "I withdraw the petition." "Elaine," Klein warned. "I withdraw it," she yelled. "It is all true. The ledger, North Pine, all of it." She pointed a trembling finger at Gavin Rourke. "He told me it would work. He told me if I sued, no one would look at the books. He told me we could fix it." Gavin Rourke stood up. "I have no idea what she is talking about." "Your Honor, this woman is hysterical." "Sit down, sir," the bailiff barked. Elaine looked at me then. Her eyes were black holes of despair. "I didn't want to hurt you. Sarah, I didn't know how to get out." She collapsed back into her chair, sobbing uncontrollably. The courtroom erupted. The judge was banging her gavel. Mina was gripping my arm. But I just sat there, staring at the woman who had given me life and who had just ended her own. The war was over, but the wreckage was everywhere, and Gavin Rourke was looking at the exit, realizing there was nowhere left to run. The heavy oak doors of the courtroom swung shut, sealing us inside a chamber that felt less like a hall of justice and more like a theater. The air was thick with the scent of floor wax and stale anxiety. I sat at the defendant's table next to Mina, my hands clasped tightly in my lap to stop them from shaking. Across the aisle, my mother sat with Wesley Klein. She looked fragile, diminished, a performance of vulnerability that was so perfect it made my stomach turn. Judge Holloway took the bench, her black robe swishing softly as she settled in. She peered over her spectacles, her gaze sweeping the room with a no-nonsense appraisal. "This is an evidentiary hearing in the matter of the estate of Marjorie Patterson," she announced. "The plaintiff alleges undue influence and lack of testamentary capacity. Mr. Klein, you may call your first witness." Klein stood up, smoothing his tie. "We call Elaine Patterson to the stand." Elaine rose. She walked to the witness box with a slow, hesitant gait, as if the weight of her grief was physically dragging her down. She took the oath in a whisper. When Klein began his questioning, Elaine didn't just answer. She performed. "Can you describe your relationship with your mother in her final years?" Klein asked gently. Elaine dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. "It was difficult," she said, her voice trembling. "I tried so hard to be there for her, but—" She paused, looking down at her hands. "I felt like I was being erased. Every time I called. Sarah was there. Every time I tried to visit. There were excuses. I felt my mother slipping away. Not just from illness, but from me." She looked up at the judge, her eyes wide and wet. "My mother loved me, Your Honor. We had our differences, like any mother and daughter, but she would never have cut me out. She would never have left me struggling while giving everything to a granddaughter who—" She glanced at me, then quickly away, as if looking at me was too painful. Who capitalized on her confusion? I sat stone still. I didn't roll my eyes. I didn't sigh. I remembered Mina's advice. Be the statue. Let her be the storm. Elaine continued for an hour. She painted a picture of a confused, isolated elderly woman and a predatory granddaughter. She talked about missing money and strange moods. She claimed I had replaced the locks, which was true, but only because she had stolen a key and that I had screened calls. By the time she finished, half the gallery looked ready to convict me of elder abuse. Mina stood up for cross-examination. She didn't attack. She didn't raise her voice. She simply walked to the podium with a stack of papers. "Mrs. Patterson," Mina said, "you claim your mother was confused and isolated." "Yes," Elaine sniffed. Mina picked up a document. "I have here the logs from the visiting nurse service. They show that in the last 6 months of her life, Marjorie Patterson received visits from 3 different book clubs, the local library committee, and her garden society. Were you aware of these visits?" Elaine hesitated. I wasn't told about them." Mina picked up another paper. "And I have here the logs from Dr. Evans, her neurologist, dated just 2 weeks before she passed." He notes, "Patient is alert, oriented ×3, and engaging in complex debate about current events. Do you disagree with Dr. Evans's medical assessment?" Elaine stiffened. "Doctors don't see what happens at night. They don't see the fear." Mina nodded, as if accepting this point. "The fear. You mentioned your mother was afraid." "Yes," Elaine said, gaining confidence. She was terrified. Mina paused. She looked at Elaine for a long, uncomfortable moment. "We agree she was terrified. Mrs. Patterson, the question is, of whom?" Elaine blinked. "I don't understand." Mina turned to the judge. "Your Honor, to address the issue of capacity and the source of the decedent's fear, the defense requests permission to play a video recording made by Marjorie Patterson on November 12th. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. Elaine's head snapped toward her lawyer. "Objection." Klein shot up. "Your Honor, we have already argued this in chambers. This is hearsay. The decedent is not here to be cross-examined. We cannot verify the circumstances under which this was recorded. It could have been scripted. It could have been manipulated." Judge Holloway looked at Klein. "Mr. Klein, we have heard testimony from the forensic expert regarding the authentication of the file. The court is satisfied that the video has not been altered. As for hearsay, this falls under the exception of a statement regarding the declarant's state of mind and testamentary intent. Overruled." Elaine's face went white. She leaned over to Klein, whispering urgently. I saw her lips move, Stop it. You have to stop it. Klein looked helpless. He sat down. Mina connected her laptop to the courtroom's audiovisual system. A large projection screen descended from the ceiling. The lights in the courtroom dimmed. I looked at my mother. She wasn't crying anymore. She was gripping the railing of the witness box so hard her knuckles were white. She looked like an animal caught in a trap, waiting for the hunter to check the snare. The static on the screen cleared. Marjorie Patterson appeared. She was sitting in her wingback chair, the same chair she had sat in to read me stories when I was a child. She looked directly into the camera lens. Her gaze was steady, her voice clear and strong. "My name is Marjorie Alice Patterson," she said. The sound of her voice filled the room, and I felt a fresh wave of grief wash over me. But it was a proud grief. She sounded like herself, not the frail invalid Elaine had described, but the matriarch who had run this family for 40 years. "I am recording this statement because I know what is coming. Grandma said, I know my daughter, Elaine, will contest my will. She will say I was not in my right mind. She will say I was influenced." Grandma leaned forward slightly. "I love my daughter," she said, "but I can no longer fund her emergencies. For 20 years, I have paid her debts. I have bailed out her businesses. I have covered her bad investments. I did it because I wanted her to be safe, but I have realized that I'm not buying her safety. I am funding her destruction." Elaine let out a small, strangled sound. Klein put a hand on her arm to quiet her. Grandma picked up a piece of paper in the video. "On October 15th, Elaine came to my house," Grandma continued. "She placed a document in front of me. It was a power of attorney, granting her full control over my investment portfolio. She told me that if I did not sign it, she would cut me off." The courtroom was deadly silent. "She told me," Grandma said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming steelier, "that if I did not give her the money, she would make sure I never saw my granddaughter Sarah again. She said she would tell Sarah I had lost my mind. She said she would poison the one relationship I have left. I saw the jury. No, there was no jury, just the judge. But I saw the gallery react. A collective intake of breath. This wasn't just a financial dispute. This was emotional extortion. But Grandma wasn't done. I refused to sign. She said, "And that is why I am leaving the bulk of my estate to Sarah. Not because Sarah asked for it, but because Sarah is the only one who never treated me like a bank." Then, she looked down at her lap and picked up the black notebook, the harbor ledger. "However," Grandma said, "there is one more thing the court must know." Elaine stood up in the witness box. Her chair scraped violently against the floor. "No," she whispered. Judge Holloway banged her gavel. "The witness will sit down." Elaine didn't sit. She stood there, trembling, her eyes fixed on the screen with pure horror. "I have discovered," Grandma said on the screen, "that the money I sent to the North Pine Outreach Fund, at Elaine's desperate request, was not going to charity. I did some digging. I hired a private investigator. North Pine is a shell." Grandma held up a check. "The money I sent to North Pine was immediately routed to a third party, a private obligation that Elaine refuses to name. She is being squeezed. She told me she is in debt to people who do not use the courts to collect." Grandma looked into the camera, her eyes filled with a terrible, knowing sadness. "If I am dead, and Elaine is suing for this money, it is not because she is greedy. It is because she is cornered. She needs $6.8 million to bury a mistake that has been chasing her for a decade. I have documented everything in this ledger, and I have left copies with my counsel." The video cut to black. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. It was the silence of a narrative collapsing in real time. Elaine stood in the witness box. The tears were gone. The act was gone. She looked stripped bare. She wasn't the grieving daughter anymore. She was the desperate debtor, exposed in open court. Judge Holloway slowly lowered her glasses. She looked at Elaine, Mrs. Patterson. The judge said, "Do you have a response to this evidence?" Elaine didn't look at the judge. She didn't look at me. She looked at the folder on Mina's desk, the folder that held the ledger and the investigator's report. She looked at it, as if it were a loaded gun pointed at her chest. Elaine stammered. Her voice was unrecognizable. It was thin, reedy. She looked over her shoulder at the back of the courtroom. I followed her gaze. She was looking at the exit. I withdraw, she said. Klein blinked. Excuse me? I withdraw the petition, Elaine said, her voice rising to a near shout. I am dropping the lawsuit. I don't want the money. I don't want any of it. Elaine, we need to recess and discuss. Klein began. No, Elaine screamed. She scrambled out of the witness box, nearly tripping over the step. I am done. Effective immediately. It is hers. Give it all to her. She grabbed her purse from the counsel table. Her hands were shaking so badly she dropped her keys. She didn't pick them up. She turned and practically ran toward the aisle. The judge banged the gavel. Mrs. Patterson, you cannot just walk out of a hearing. Elaine didn't stop. She pushed through the double doors, fleeing as if the building itself were on fire. Judge Holloway stared at the swinging doors, then looked down at Klein. Mr. Klein, am I to understand that your client is voluntarily dismissing her petition with prejudice? Klein looked like he had been slapped. He gathered his papers, his face flushed red. I believe so. Your Honor, I apologize to the court. Judge Holloway turned her gaze to me. Ms. Patterson. The judge said, It appears the contest to the will has been withdrawn. The will stands. The estate will proceed to probate as written. She banged the gavel. Case dismissed. I sat there, stunned. It was over. Just like that. The monster that had been eating my life for months had just turned and run away. Mina let out a long breath and closed her laptop. I told you, she said quietly. She was terrified of the video, but I didn't think she would fold that fast. She was afraid of what came next. I said, the investigation, the North Pine records. Mina nodded. She didn't want to go to prison, and she definitely didn't want whoever is behind North Pine to see their name in a court transcript. We packed up our things in silence. The victory didn't feel like triumph. It felt like survival. I had my inheritance. I had the house. But I had lost my mother in a way that felt final. I walked out of the courtroom and into the wide marble hallway. Elaine was there. She was standing near the water fountain, leaning against the wall as if her legs wouldn't hold her. She was staring at the floor. I told Mina to wait for me by the elevators. I walked over to my mother. She didn't look up as I approached. It is over. Mom, I said. She laughed. A harsh, jagged sound. Over? Nothing is over. Sarah. She finally looked at me. Her makeup was smeared. Her eyes were bloodshot. She looked 10 years older than she had an hour ago. You got what you wanted, she said. You got the money. You got the house. You got to prove I am the villain. I didn't want any of this. I said, I just wanted to honor Grandma's wishes. Grandma didn't know. Elaine hissed. She thought she was protecting you. She thought she was teaching me a lesson. She pushed herself off the wall and took a step toward me. She lowered her voice to a whisper. You think North Pine was just me? You think I set that up? I know about the shell companies. I said, I know about the money laundering. You know nothing, Elaine said. You found a ledger and you think you solved a puzzle. You didn't solve anything. You just kicked a hornet's nest. She looked around the hallway, her eyes darting to the corners, checking for listeners. You don't know what they will do if this goes further, she whispered. Who? I asked. Who are they? Elaine shook her head. I can't say it. I tried to fix it. Sarah, I tried to get the money so I could pay them off and make it stop. But now... She looked at me with a strange expression. It wasn't hate anymore. It was pity. You have the money now, she said, which means you are the target. What does that mean? I demanded. She didn't answer. She turned and walked toward the exit, her heels clicking on the marble floor. Mom! I called out. She didn't look back. She pushed through the revolving doors and disappeared into the bright, blinding afternoon light. I stood there, the chill of her words settling into my bones. You are the target. Mina walked up behind me. Is she gone? Mina asked. Yes, I said. Did she say anything? I hesitated. I thought about telling Mina about the threat, about the mysterious they, but I was so tired. I was so desperate for this to be over. She just said she was sorry. I lied. Mina looked at me, knowing I was holding something back. But she didn't push. The judge will sign the order this afternoon. Mina said, "The freeze on the assets is lifted. The house is yours. The money is yours. We won." Sarah. I nodded. We won. But as we walked out of the courthouse, I couldn't shake the feeling that I hadn't won a war. I had just won the first battle. I thought about Gavin Rourke. He hadn't been in the courtroom when Elaine fled. I hadn't seen him leave. I thought about the black SUV that had followed me in the rain. I thought about the private obligation that was still unpaid. Elaine was right about one thing. The money was mine now, and debts, in my family, seemed to be inherited right along with the assets. I walked to my car, the key to 42 Ocean View Drive in my pocket. I was going home. I was going to open the windows. I was going to sit in Grandma's chair. And then, I was going to find out exactly who North Pine was. Because if they thought they could come for me, they were going to find out that I wasn't Elaine. I didn't break, and I didn't pay blackmail. I was Marjorie Patterson's granddaughter, and I had the ledger now. Thank you for listening to My Mom Sued Me for Grandma's $6.8 million will. A secret video made her drop everything. This story was a journey through betrayal, secrets, and the lengths a family will go to for money and for survival. I hope you enjoyed the twists and the final courtroom showdown. I would love to hear from you in the comments. Where are you listening from today? Are you tuning in from the busy streets of New York, the quiet countryside of England, or somewhere in between? Let me know. And if you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories. We have many more tales of justice, karma, and family drama coming your way. Share your thoughts on Sarah's decision. Would you have forgiven Elaine? Or would you have done exactly what Sarah did? Until next time, keep your secrets safe and your ledgers hidden.